This video is brought to you by Ting Mobile. To sum up what you're saying, you hate him because that's the only character with glasses and you think anyone that's not born with genetically good vision doesn't deserve to be on the screen. Fair enough. We'll see what the viewers think. What's up, Wisecrack? Welcome to the good, the bad, and the brilliant. The show where we break down the movies, TV shows, and games we are really excited about. I'm Michael, and today I'm joined by Wisecrack host Helen, who also happens to be a shock trooper in training. And today we are going to be breaking down The Mandalorian. Now, The Mandalorian is a new Disney Plus show that follows the adventures of a lone bounty hunter as he travels the galaxy, tries to be a good dad to Baby Yoda, and fights off the remnants of the Empire. But before we get into it, spoilers ahead. We are going to be breaking down the show in a lot of detail. That said, let's start by getting into the good. So, Helen, what is good about The Mandalorian?
It was a good story. It was interesting to see this guy go from, being kind of the cold-hearted gunslinger to a diplomat in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about someone that goes from zapping people into a pile of dust to nuzzling a little baby and making sure he has enough bone broth and putting things on the line for his friends. Along with what you said, which I totally agree with, I think it did a really good job of world building. For all of us that love the Star Wars universe, it was so cool to see these sort of stories that were taking a place like underneath all the big stuff. Seeing what everyday people were doing, whether that be like a lone Mandalorian bounty hunter or a shock trooper without a job. And the way in which the show kind of references other aspects of the Star Wars universe without being too heavy-handed. So we feel like we're someplace familiar, but we're exploring new aspects of that familiar place.
That was one of the things I loved too, was, really getting a sense of the kind of crap that a bounty hunter at this point in the Star Wars, timeline is having to deal with every day, right? Like having to deal with essentially, non-guild wages, and people who are just gonna try to rip you off and who will just, not pay you in a currency that is usable in most places.
These are Imperial credits.
They still spend.
I don't know if you heard, but the Empire is gone.
Yeah, and something that's so great is like, we know that while all of this is happening, the Republic is trying to keep hold on things after the Battle at Endor. The First Order is sort of forming from the shell of the old Republic and the Empire and all this sort of stuff. But we're just seeing, more minor characters in that universe. And even when we cut to the cities on different planets and the taverns and all this sort of stuff, you're kind of seeing a bunch of people making sense of a world that seems really uncertain and really unstable. There's a sort of realism to it, as silly as that sounds, which I found really compelling throughout.
And the Mandalorians are absolutely fascinating, which I thought too was really excited to see, a live action show that focuses on them because their lore is so rich.
Especially if you've only watched the live action Star Wars content, we know very little about the Mandalorian. Right. We have sort of our famous friends Jango and Boba Fett, but they've remained kind of elusive, so it's great to just zoom in on one of those characters and get into that lore, and maybe some of us for years thought they were inherently bad guys, because we didn't like when Boba Fett tried to hurt Han and Leia and Luke. Yeah. But there's something so much more interesting going on there, and I think the show answers a lot of those questions and gives that backstory, but then motivates you to search for more.
I went down a rabbit hole, just as before we were taping this, to just looking at a documentary of the Mandalorians, right? And like 24,000 years of Mandalorian history. It was great. I'm just so thankful someone put that together because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best things about Star Wars is that there's endless lore to explore.
Yeah,
right?
And I think it's just so cool that Jon Favreau, the creator of the series, I was skeptical at first, I think of Jon Favreau as what he did The Lion Kings, directed some Marvel movies, was in Swingers,
right.
Close personal friend of Vince Vaughn.
Right.
But past that, I didn't really know how he was going to treat this material, and I think it's very, very apparent that he's a huge fan and he cares. And he was able to focus on these minor stories and tell them with a seriousness and a care and really giving these characters the attention they deserve. And moving forward from season 1, I feel like we're in really good hands.
I agree. It's very nice to see somebody, really respect the material and, and treat it with the reverence that it deserves.
Yeah.
And it's a little surprising, I'm not gonna lie, coming from Disney.
So we agree, we like the story.
Yes.
We like the world that's getting built out here. So what's something else about The Mandalorian that you walked away thinking, it's good?
It's, you know what it was? It was fierce characters who happen to be female.
fierce characters who happen to be female.
Not just fierce female characters, but women who were intimidating and who were engaging and interesting, and specifically obviously Cara Dune, who was like
Cara Dune.
She's straight out of a video game. What a hero!
Yeah.
Like that is obviously my costume for Halloween, possibly my Twitter profile pic from here on out.
Why not?
Why not, right?
Yeah.
Because she was brilliant,
Yeah.
and she could, without any pretense, not like, oh, look at this girl kicking some dude's ass, could just kick ass,
So it's been talked about quite a bit, but we know that The Mandalorian is very influenced by both the samurai and the Western film tradition. As someone that is a big Western fan and knows a little bit about that tradition, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I thought they did a really good job of incorporating elements of the Western canon and even straight up, and I mean this in a good way, copying sequences from classic Western films in that universe that works so well. The big example that stood out to me was the films of Sam Peckinpah. And Peckinpah is famous for these End of the West films, which are a lot less optimistic and hopeful than like a John Wayne film. He's exploring a world where things don't look good, and a lot of characters in gray moral areas are trying their best, kind of like Mando. One of his most famous films is called The Wild Bunch. There's a sequence at the end where one of the main characters, surrounded by a bunch of other people, trying to rescue a friend, probably gonna die, gets a machine gun and just goes out fighting. Same thing we see Mando do in episode 1 and an IG-11 do in episode 8. The same theme, and I thought it just honored the Western tradition so well, and it makes it pretty clear that Favreau and the directors are real fans of the Western tradition. They weren't just trying to pull from it in a cute way. They were really trying to get at the core of what's so great about that, so I loved seeing those elements.
Nice, yeah, absolutely. I've read, a lot too that, even George Lucas himself was influenced,
Yeah.
obviously, by Westerns and by samurai films in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And it gives people what they really want in a Star Wars story, which is that story of,
Yes.
these kinds of characters going through these trials and again becoming, going from being space pirates to being heroes, going from being bounty hunters to being again diplomat.
I think the Western element really allowed the show to avoid the sort of dichotomous morality of the main story films, where it's always absolutely good guys, absolutely bad guys. For most of the series, we're not sure. And a few episodes in, with Mando especially, I don't know if you're going to take care of Baby Yoda. You do give him back to crazy Werner Herzog, the client guy, and it's not until you have a change of heart you go back there. So we really see characters in this middle space. There's no magical heroes. There's no absolutely evil bad guys until the end. And I really thought that was another cool way they pulled from that tradition.
You could almost see, after having, this setup where he's not getting paid and he's having to take on these dangerous missions that, they're not giving out to anybody else because he's the only one that can handle them because they're so dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And that, if he did bring him back cold, could you blame the guy? Obviously, we don't want that as
he's
an
from
audience.
a group of people that lives in a sewer system. Only one of them can go outside at a time.
Yes.
I mean, things aren't going well for Mandalorians. And then if we know anything about them from this show, even if we had no prior knowledge, this is the way. We have each other's backs. We take care of each other.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the brilliant things we see here is when he's at his best as a surrogate dad to Baby Yoda, he's basically just being a good Mandalorian.
And he is reinventing the way, because what's interesting about Mandalorians is their philosophy is such that good is violent. They see eliminating weakness as good. And instead, you've got this guy who, through the influence of Queel, who I think is actually, and also that's another one of my big goods, is Queel, right? As a mentor and as a helper. He hasn't turned completely pacifist, but he's like, oh, there's a different way. He's still practicing the way in some sense, but it's a different way. He has evolved the way of the Mandalorian by becoming more diplomatic and using communication over combat.
Well, I love that point you made about the Mandalorians being ones that really prioritize power, violence, strength, big metal suits, husky voices. What's less that than Baby Yoda? He's tiny and he's just sipping his tea and his soup and he gets tired and sleepy and he can't speak any languages yet. I mean, this is the opposite of metal-clad gunslinging strength, and yet he can do some strong stuff that a Mandalorian can't. So it's a fun little contradiction there, and I think gets at that theme of questioning tradition, rethinking these sorts of things. I kind of like some of the what we maybe call stunt casting here. People that we wouldn't expect to see in that universe. In particular, a lot of like random comedic actors that showed up.
Oh, yeah.
We have Amy Sedaris hanging out, fixing up ships on Tatooine. In the final episode, the bastards that bop Baby Yoda in the head are the stormtroopers are Adam Pally and Jason Sudeikis.
That's right.
Another SNL vet, Horatio Sands, is in episode 1. Of course, not that he's really a comedic actor, but Carl Weathers from Arrested Development, amongst other things.
Whoa. There's still plenty of meat on that bone. Now you take this home, throw it in a pot, add some broth, a potato. Baby, you got a stew going.
Werner Herzog,
who did a great job, was the perfect, kind of terrifying client and
Yeah.
little weird.
well, I know if we had to, we could go on, because there's lots of good stuff, but maybe it's time to get into the bad. Hey guys, I know you're probably really excited to hear what we thought was bad about The Mandalorian, but first we want to give a shout out to something that's good. This week's sponsor, Ting Mobile. Ting is an American cell phone provider that can help you save money on your monthly phone bill. Ting only charges you for the talk, text, and data that you actually use each month. So if you use less one month, you pay less. If you find that you're usually at home, work, or school and covered by Wi-Fi, then you might not even come close to using up all the data on your current plan. That's money down the drain. Ting bills you at the end of the month for what you've actually used, and the average Ting user only pays $23 a month. Plus, if you and your family or friends hop on the same plan, you can even pay less, since usage is across all your phones. There's no overage charges or hidden fees, and you get the same 4G LTE coverage as the big carriers. You can always bring over your number, and there's no contracts or commitments to try Ting. So why not try Ting out for yourself and save some money? Go to wisecrack.ting.com and get a $25 credit to try Ting Mobile right now with your current phone. Based on the average bill, that's a whole month of service for free. Once again, that's wisecrack.ting.com. Now, it's time to hear what's bad and brilliant about The Mandalorian. So Helen, what did we think was not the best? Dare I say even bad about The Mandalorian?
I don't have too many complaints, but one small thing that I did take issue with was the character of Dr. Pershing. And specifically, and I've seen this brought up other places, but his ridiculous glasses, which seems like such a small thing, but felt so out of place to me in this universe.
It made him look like an evil German scientist
Yeah.
who did really bad stuff, but justified it by saying it was just an experiment or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe that guy. Little bit Doctor Strange-lovey. I was trying to figure out what his purpose was, what he was supposed to reflect about the Mandalorian, or was he just kind of...
Well, this is what we still don't know, right? Why did they want Baby Yoda so bad?
Yeah.
It seemed like there was some sort of DNA extraction. Are they trying to clone him? Are they trying to get a high midichlorian count
That was
and then
my
inject it in people or something like that? It was a little vague there, so I feel you on that one.
Yeah, no, I can live without knowing exactly why, although obviously it would have been great to know a little bit more.
Yeah.
But he just seemed so inconsequential, and he was so timid when he first met, the Mandalorian. I thought maybe we're supposed to see that as, this guy as he's afraid of Mando, and therefore we now can understand even better, how intimidating he is. Or how intimidating Mando is. But I couldn't figure out what was if there was a purpose to him or not, and I'm probably overthinking him.
No, and to sum up what you're saying, you hate him because that's the only character with glasses, and you think anyone that's not born with genetically good vision doesn't deserve to be on the screen. Fair enough. We'll see what the viewers think.
Yeah.
No, but I think I agree with what you're saying there. I think there's some unanswered stuff. Once again, I don't want to say that they have to explain everything in 8 episodes. We want there to be some fun meat left on the bone for coming seasons, but for the life of me, I need to know how the tracking fobs work. Because we have these little fobs, and supposedly they just let you know where someone is, but Baby Yoda doesn't have a chip in him or something like that. He's not like a puppy that got registered. Mando presumably has one of these on himself as well. So we have this magical device that's able to track anyone in the universe. We don't explain it. If this technology exists, why do we ever have to search for anyone? So I need to know that. My guess would be that we will not get an explanation, but it did irk me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that, and I was kind of trying to suspend my disbelief there a little bit, but even then, as you put it, where is the quest then? If you can just kind of look on hey, I'm getting warmer, roughly where they are.
Well, if I can talk about Baby Yoda, How does he use the Force so well? In the rest of Star Wars canon, even if someone has a high concentration of midichlorians, remember Anakin had the highest amount ever on record, which would mean that he had more than Yoda, because Yoda was also on record, and he had to really like do some work to get going. Luke, chosen one, he's in the Dagobah system crying like a little emo baby because he can't lift the X-Wing while Yoda's yelling at him. But Baby Yoda, who doesn't have access to linguistic capacities yet, is just like making the mud horn freeze in air. He's doing force healing. And of course, this is the first time we saw force healing, I think, in Star Wars canon.
Well, I think, if I recall correctly, members of that species, which
Yes,
have
we're still unnamed.
have been described by George Lucas
Yeah.
as the illegitimate child of, Miss Piggy and
Kermit?
and Kermit the Frog. Yeah, the illegitimate
Wait,
child.
did he really say that?
He did at some point say that.
Done is we're going to blend Kermit the Frog with Miss Piggy. This is actually the illegitimate child of Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy.
Oh, man.
We've never discussed this before.
I think it was a joke. It was definitely a joke.
Wow.
But, we don't know. It remains a mystery, right? But I do remember from, I do recall that they are exceptionally good at manipulating the Force, and I will say that Baby Yoda isn't consistent. He chokes Cara Dune in the scene when
so
she's...
scary.
Yeah, a little bit scary.
Wait, but then if he's using it instinctively with emotion, who uses the Force emotionally? Who uses it to protect those they love? Not a Jedi.
Not a Jedi, and we can't say with any certainty that he isn't a Sith, or isn't any other kind of,
Oh, that would
we
be
don't know.
horrible.
It would be, and pretty interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
but if we don't know. We don't know anything
Yeah.
about the child. Who is the child?
The child.
The child. Gotta get the meme out of your brain.
No,
Remember.
we get a
the
name in
child.
season 2, supposedly. Supposedly,
Do
Taika
we?
Waititi and Jon Favreau know the name.
That's right.
They won't tell us.
So how can, Baby Yoda manipulate the Force? How does the child have these abilities? Well, again, I think it's partially explained by the kind of unparalleled ability of that particular species to be able to manipulate the Force, but you bring up a good question. We don't know.
Yeah, but I imagine if Jimi Hendrix ever had a son, he would have been intuitively good at guitar from a young age, so maybe it's just like that.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of other things that I think are bad, because I like the show so much, there's some things that I thought were just kind of eh.
Yeah.
One of those I'd say for me was episodes 5 and 6. I thought they were fine, but I felt like the episodes were diverted a little bit. So we have like the gunslinger episode, and then the episode with Bill Burr in a gun backpack. They were both good episodes, but I felt like they lost a little bit of steam because we were off our main story and our main quest.
I actually thought that episode 6 was pretty relevant to the character arc
Yeah.
of Mando, because we see him once again acting as the diplomat and evolving the Mandalorian way. We see Mando tell the rest of the crew who he has run with for all of these years and who have seen him in his days when he, is using people for target practice. He says, "No, let's negotiate." And they're
Yeah.
like, "What are you talking about? Who is this
Yeah.
guy?"
We're not killing anybody, you understand?
Get that blaster out of my face, Mando.
I can't do that.
Get that blaster out of my face, Mando!
Don't.
So I actually thought that, while maybe not completely necessary, it was an important episode to reflect Mando's
No,
character arc.
and you're right. And this is why,
evolution.
even in my notes when I tried to think of bad stuff, I was like writing out stuff for 6, and my last bullet point is actually what Mando pulls off at the end is really awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So
It
even
was
by
good.
the end of that, that's me forcing myself to say I thought this season took a little dip, but that's really it. I don't have a lot of other bad stuff. Anything you got?
I really don't have anything either, which I was kind of surprised, with some of these properties that do come outside of, of the kind of the classic Star Wars story, I think, in terms of, just the main core films. I expected there to be more to hate on, but there wasn't. All right, guys, we've given you the good, the bad, and now it's time to get into the brilliant.
Actually, not quite yet. Before we get to the brilliant, I'm going to put you on the spot with some lightning round questions about both The Mandalorian and the wider Star Wars universe. Are you ready? Actually, it doesn't matter because you're getting them anyways. So, would you rather be a krill farmer or a blurg wrangler?
A blurg wrangler.
If you could have one accessory in your life made out of Beskar, what would it be?
A helmet.
Fair enough. Any dream cameos for season 2? Some actor that you'd love to see pop into this universe?
God. Liam Neeson, actually. Liam Neeson, actually.
As Qui-Gon Jinn?
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
That's fine. I'm supposed to cut you off guard here. All right. Would you rather be a Mandalorian or a Jedi?
I thought about this one a lot. A Jedi.
Fair enough. Will Mando find romantic love at some point in the series?
No, he shouldn't.
Wow. Okay. If you had to choose between the most recent trilogy, films 7, 8, and 9, or The Mandalorian, you're only able to watch one of these for the rest of your life. Which one are you keeping and which one's getting thrown in the trash compactor?
The Mandalorian is here to stay for me. Let's get out 7, 8, and 9.
If you could see one character from the original trilogy show up in season 2, who do you want to see?
You know, I gotta go with, I think, Luke, actually.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him show up. I feel like he has a place in this part of the universe.
Great. And finally, any dream directors for season 2? Anyone who you'd love to see swoop in and get their own little chunk of The Mandalorian?
Who would do a really interesting job with The Mandalorian? You know what would be really bizarre, actually, would be a Wes Anderson Mandalorian episode. Give me some weird, kind of funky characters and some pastels and some, yeah.
Okay.
That might be kind of intriguing.
The Mandalorian traveled by way of his Razor Crest to the planet of Maldo Kreese. He was not in high spirits.
I like that, and because your answers are so good, I'll return the privilege. It's now your turn.
All right. Cool.
Give me your best shot.
So I need you to rank these famous Mandalorians, all right? Jango Fett, Boba Fett, and Mando. Pretty straightforward.
Mando, Jango, Boba last. Boba tried to kill my friends.
Okay.
And I felt like Jango was just trying to do his job. He's on Camino. He gets a contract. If you fly me out to a seaside island and say, we want to make hundreds of you, we love you so much, we want to take whatever we got to take to make a bunch of you, yeah, my narcissism's taking over. I want an army of myself.
Okay, that's a good answer.
It's not what you asked, but now you know that.
I do know that. I don't
if
know
my
if I'm
therapist
better
is
for knowing
watching, I'm working through the issue. Sorry. Keep going.
By all means. Okay, so which creature would you least like to be stuck with on a cross-galaxy road trip?
Ooh, out of any of them?
Let's give 3 of them. Let's do Watto from episode 1.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go another obnoxious episode 1 character. Let's go with Jar Jar Binks.
Okay.
And then let's just go with a Jawa.
I don't want Watto with me. That guy sucked. And I hate his voice. It's really obnoxious. He sounds like in old Italian bookie. Yeah. And he seems like he probably smells.
Hey, maybe you could help with some deadbeats who owe me a lot of money.
If you had to pick one Star Wars creature to use as your primary mode of transportation, what would it be?
Oh. You know what? This is recency bias, but I want to tame a blurg. I want to make it trust me, and I want to jump over little canyons in it. I'll take it to the national parks. Well, I don't need a donkey at the Grand Canyon because I have a blurg now. So I'm blurging it.
What Star Wars world are you from?
Oh, that's good. What Star Wars world am I from? Oh, this is so hard. I kind of want to say, from what we know of it, I feel like I would have enjoyed Alderaan before it got blown up. I like places that have a little bit of order and some ingrained historical culture, but where it seems like there's a little room for rebellion and rethinking norms. I mean, this is the place that raised Princess Leia as both the stately princess, but kind of the, smart, sarcastic badass. Any place that births, and I guess not births, but raises Leia, it's good enough for me.
Okay.
Although I would acknowledge that my entire family would have been blown up in one fell swoop and I'd have no home again.
But you're okay with that reality, so moving on.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I grew up in Florida, so it's basically the same.
Pretty much the same thing. All right, and last question here. Rank your Star Wars trilogies.
Oh no. Okay. We're starting at the bottom. For the bottom, I'm going to do the prequels. I'm going to say just above the prequels. Note that I'm saying just above 7 through 9, and then the original trilogy.
Okay.
When the original trilogy, quite a ways above, if I'm honest. But I'll say this, I still like them all. I'll still watch them all. The worst Star Wars is still better than many other things. I'm always happy to be in that world, so.
We're in agreement on that. Although I'm not sure that I actually, one of those people who grew up with the prequels and the originals, but also with
Episode 3 holds up.
Yes, absolutely.
I have the high ground.
And 2 is
2 is
one of the
like
worst movies I've
below
ever
that.
seen.
Yeah, 2 is way
I hate
below.
sand, and he's so scary, and like
Dialogue,
you're falling in love with a child who's exhibiting fascist tendencies left and right. Left and right.
Just so painful.
I'm more
It was an
sympathetic
abomination.
to Luke and Leia's flirtation with second base than I am with what happened with Padme and Anakin. So let's talk about what's brilliant. What do you got?
All right, so what was brilliant for me was Mando's relationship with technology, and specifically droids, and how that evolves in concert with his character.
Yeah.
And he goes from having this very Mandalorian stance on droids and technology as well as his own obviously very personal relationship with technology as being, well, I shouldn't say technology, but with droids as being a destructive force in his life, a very traumatizing force.
Yeah.
To ultimately, coming into a symbiotic relationship with a droid in order to protect what they love. At the end of the episode.
I mean, if you would have told me at the end of episode 1 that a huge arc of the 8-episode show would be sort of Mando and IG-11's parallel relationship, from a point where in episode 1 he kills IG-11 without looking at him, we just see that blaster shot from the side, so by the end, IG-11 is sacrificing his life, not just for Baby Yoda, but for all of them. Along the way, healing Mando, who's dying, who has problems with his central processing unit, needs that BAFTA spray. I mean, who would have thought those two would end up being not only on the same side, but really helping each other in huge ways?
Absolutely, and I think that again, it was a very much a what reflected, Mando's own journey, right? He goes from being someone who embodies the Mandalorian way of combat, being the good, to one who is willing to becomes much more peaceful and diplomatic, and someone who's willing to negotiate, and also is willing to accept help from and work together with something that has been such a negative force in his life.
Well, yeah, I feel like episode 1, Mando starts out as the singular unit, but by the very end, he's built this family. You have him and IG-11 and Greef Karga and Cara Dune and Baby Yoda, and they're together kind of fighting on the same team, and it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you think was brilliant?
Building off what we've talked about already a little bit, but I really think the way they revealed Mando's backstory in pieces throughout, I thought was really compelling. And I think the way that we understand that he is someone who has dealt with horrific trauma. He watched his parents, or heard his parents, sadly, get murdered by a droid. He himself almost got murdered by a droid before being rescued by the Mandalorian. So there's this trauma at the heart of who he is, and someone who grew up without a biological family, was taken into this other family. And I just find that interesting, both at the psychological level of understanding this character, but also if we think about the protagonist of so many other Star Wars properties. I mean, this guy doesn't have special magical blood. He doesn't have the most evil grandpa of all time. He's someone that came from a really traumatic circumstance and has made his way through the galaxy. And I find that, when the show started, I thought, am I really going to connect with someone who wears a mask the whole time? How am I going to find that a compelling character that I'll empathize with or relate to? But God, they got me.
They really did, because he goes through this transformation and is, just like you put it, is revealed in this slow way that you see as he is evolving. His past is revealed, and you can see his growth while you are also seeing where he has come from in a way that really makes you be able to identify with him. And I love the way you put it, despite the fact that he's wearing a mask.
Yeah. I know, and I just think overall, and this connects with something we talked about a little bit in the good section, but the way in which the whole series avoids black and white, good and bad dichotomies throughout. We see sort of moral and ethical transformation. We see people from different sides working together, and we see people that are just trying to survive. Almost all of these characters are sort of like are mercenaries, are people without whether it's like a literal family or a political group to be a part of, or one of the teams. They're just making their way through a galaxy that's been devastated. And I think it's so important that, we finish Return of the Jedi, and it seems great. The Ewoks are dancing, the Death Star is dead, but like, what happens? And we see what happens. Things don't magically get better. There's not some beautiful political revolution which everyone's hugging all the times, and it's rough. And it creates a really rough, like, post-war, post-battle of Endor scene. And we get to see that in a really honest and stark way.
The way that turbulence that comes from, what was ultimately, yay, the heroes win, the good guys are in power now and evil has been defeated. It's like, okay, well, there are consequences to that, right? And it's interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but something that I kind of understand about a lot of Westerns is that they take place at a point of turbulence, that a lot of, of those old films do, where, it's post-Civil War, or it is, just of the period where you are exploring and you're like meeting the unknown. And
the West in general, both in films and historically, on the other side of the Mississippi, it was like, go West, so many opportunities, there's milk and honey and gold and everything's gonna be wonderful. And it wasn't. And it sucked for a lot of people, and it was rough, and they were just trying to survive. And that's why we do have that bleak, moral fabric in a lot of the Western canon. There's no room to be, the ultimately virtuous or ultimately evil person when you're just trying to survive in a rough habitat without political stability after a war or whatever it might be. And to go back to the top of it, that's something that like Peckinpah's films explore really well. This end of the West, what happens when there isn't some great moralistic virtuous thing to look forward to,
Absolutely. And and seeing that in this series, how that impacts, these characters on a daily life was really, really well done and very illuminating.
Yeah.
Which I think is what good sci-fi does, right? Shows you realities and possibilities of, the ramifications of technology and of space wars and of these kinds of things, and makes them, takes the realities that we have to deal with and puts them in, this kind of futuristic, awe-inspiring place, right? And it makes them, it makes them more concrete to you in a way, because you're like, oh, these kinds of things happen in this fantastic world.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's one of the things I love about sci-fi in general, and about this series and these films.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to say anything else was it all in the brilliant category, it would just be all the places we have to go now. Imagining where this story could go in season 2 makes me so excited and so happy, and even, to quote Genuine, so anxious, because it could go so many ways and there's so many great questions and possibilities. So I think they've left us in a really good place, and they really stuck the landing with episode 8. So I'm excited to see where this goes. Helen, we've done it. We've gone from the good to the bad to the brilliant. We both survived a kind of unfair and intense lightning round. So there's one last thing to do. We need to give it our individual ratings. And this time around, we're gonna rank things on a scale of tasty frogs to honor our friend, the child, or Baby Yoda. So we see how happy it makes him to swallow one whole frog. So of course, a 1 is only 1 frog, all the way up to 5 tasty frogs in your belly. How many fresh frogs do you give The Mandalorian, Helen?
The Mandalorian is 4 fresh frogs for me, Michael. That's it. 4 delicious fresh frogs.
Wow, I mean, as much as I in general want to copy everything you say, this time's honest, it's earnest, it's real. I'm also giving it 4 out of 5 fresh frogs. I almost feel as full and happy as a Baby Yoda belly stuffed with frogs, but there's like a little room for something more. I think there was a couple of low moments, but overall, a satisfying meal.
Absolutely delicious. Yeah, and it just leaves you wanting more, which all delicious meals kind of do in some degree, right?
Oh my God,
just craving them now. So definitely can't wait to see what The Mandalorian has in store for us next season. So
fantastic. Well, Helen, you started this episode as just a shock trooper in training, trying to find her way in this galaxy, but I can confidently say you don't need to be in training anymore. You're a fully fledged shock trooper of content analysis. So, yes. So, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Can't wait to have you back to talk about season 2. But for now, this This has been the good, the bad, and the brilliant on The Mandalorian. Thank you so much for sticking around, and please let us know what you'd like to see us cover in the future. As always, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time. Peace.